Wonderful, wonderful. Hello, 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 everyone. Hello, hello, everyone. We are, yeah, we are, yeah. Most excellent. And just by the way, if I look over my shoulder every now and then, it's because I baked the bread, and the bread is sitting right there, and it's smelling most delicious. And I am a bit hungry, but well, I don't want to be eating right now. If I had guests, then I might eat because, well, I can get the guests while they're chatting away, and I'm just listening to them. I could eat, but I don't know if I will have anybody join me or not. But anyway, just so you know, if I look over there with a longing look in my eye, just know fresh bread is calling me. It's calling me. I do like bread. Bread is most excellent. Most excellent. And baking is a marvelous activity, by the way, from a point of view of learning to be precise, learning to be aware, not worrying too much, understanding that there's plenty of flexibility that is involved. So many advantages to baking. I have a post somewhere about just the magic of baking. Something I would recommend. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but still, it's worthwhile doing. Just to know that you can and have the experience, because it does require shifts in our mindsets, which are very useful. And of course, if you're going to worry too much with baking, then it's going to be a miserable event. So it is related to anxiety and worry. All right. Here we are. One more share. Share it to my timeline. Okay. Wonderful. So please, everyone, feel free to comment. I do respond to the comments. They are important. They make a difference. They matter. And I really do enjoy the comments. They really add a lot. Oh. Aaron Tuft. Things just catch my eye sometimes. I'm just waiting for a couple to come. I know they said they're coming. So, yeah. All right, there we go. So let's go over where we're at. Just to recap, this is of course, anxiety and worry, and very specifically and deliberately, how to become free from anxiety and worry. This is our goal, our aim, so that we can not only understand it, know what it is, but have means and mechanisms for unhooking from anxiety and worry. And I want to make an important point here, because I made this point somewhere else, that we can find peace and release. It's in my book, through understanding, but not everybody seems to get this, right? They say, well, we didn't really say how I got to deal with the stuff. The how is in the understanding. Once we understand something, right? For instance, if you understand why you worry, how you worry, what's involved, how does that not lead to changing? If you understand that, worry doesn't make sense, how do you keep worrying? Please, I am keen to answer this question. So if you're watching, on the replay, or live, either way, please, I'm very interested to know if some answers to that question. It's a direct question, but just because it's a direct question, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is how we actually act on the question, how we live by it, what we do, right? Very many things are there once we're aware, but not until they become there are they there, right? So the obvious is not obvious until it becomes obvious. This is very important understanding, very, very important understanding. So we can get change through understanding, Because when we understand why we need to change and what the benefits of change are and what the detriments of not changing are, how do we not change? How do we not change once we understand? It's not possible, at least not for me, right? Because the only way we cannot change once we really understand the positives and the negatives involved, the only way we cannot change is by not being self-honest, right? Okay, you could say, yeah, but what about habits? Yes, habits. I might understand, see the value of it, but my habits keep pulling me back. I make the effort to change and then I fall into my old habits. So this is a very, very big factor, habits. It's a very big issue. And we'll get into habits in some point in the program too. This is a very, very powerful deal, habits. So we can do. Yes, other things are maybe the circumstances outside of your control. But when it comes to things like anxiety and worry, that's within your control, right? So those are internal matters. I'm just saying that would be the other reason for not changing. It's not possible. I suppose there might be some reason why you need to exhibit anxiety and worry. I could come up with some peculiar scenarios. You know, the world doesn't always work the way we think it does, but nonetheless. All right, so let me screen share here, and this is where we're at, module 3, discerning the complexity. And just to get to where we're at now, and those are all the different topics we're going to cover, just a quote there. And last week, or the last 2 weeks, we dealt with all the payoffs, right? And I absolutely recommend going through this list here. And when you go through it, say, yeah, that connects with me. Yes, you know, okay, yes, yeah. And be self-honest, right? And saying, like righteousness. Oh, now that you mention it, so like, yeah, I never really thought of my anxiety and worry, the payoff being, you know, it's making me feeling very righteous, right? Yeah, it's kind of crappy. You know, all right, yeah, all right, I got to change that, right? And now that I'm aware of it, I can't stick with it. You see how understanding changes us, right? When we understand and we self-honest, like this, right? It just happened to catch my eye here, right? This word righteousness right there, one of the payoffs. Yeah? When it's in this context of I'm trying to exemplify and elucidate on how understanding leads to change, but it has to go with self-honesty, right? So when you make this connection, say, wow, now I'm associated. So I never thought of my anxiety and worry. It was never connected to righteousness. But now that you mention it, that resonates, that connects. I can't get that out of my head now because it's true. And if we're honest, we can't get rid of such truths, right? So awareness becomes self-curative in situations like that, right? All we need to do is make that connection and then associate it and say, yeah, you're right. You know, for me, my anxiety and worry is all about being righteous. Oh, right. Wow. There goes that. Now I can't do it anymore. See, just like that. Boom. Shift, change. So when we really understand, change is easy. Change is easy. But it's about those meaningful associations. Jessica and I had a most meaningful association earlier in her Zoom session, her private Zoom session. And we were talking about this, right? The connection, meaning, finding meaning, and associations, paying attention, and all this, right? Very powerful when we make those meaningful associations. The brain is wired, it's set up to really perform ideally with associations. Think of a library, right? Think of your brain like a library. You go to the librarian and say, you know, I need a book on this and that, some very specialized topic subject. The library, it goes right away. Okay, yeah, you go. It's all some, because why? Because all of the books are associated with categories and understandings and so on. Right? Everything is sorted. So the librarian knows where to go. And, you know, books can be in multiple categories, of course, right? And, you know, good library will know this, right? So when we associate things, and because the book has been appropriately filed in the right category, because of those tags, those associations, right? You know, the genres, whatever, all the different category subjects, right? That makes it easy to retrieve the book. Same for us, right? So we need to tag things and have these meaningful associations. That's what tagging is. It's to associate something with meaning. Yes. So be very, very mindful of how you associate things. And when we look at our problems, it's because we've got misassociations, inappropriate associations, like, for instance, anxiety and worry being associated with righteousness. Yeah, I mean, I just picked this up. It could be all sorts of stuff, disguised judgment, whatever, right? Self-care, need for love, any of these are typically, these payoffs are all about inappropriate associations, which are apparently meaningful, but not really, right? It's a surface meaning. It's a meaningfulness. It's a shallow meaningfulness, like righteousness, right? It's very shallow, right? I'm all righteous. Look, I'm worrying, and this is like, shows how I care and all. Yeah, it's weak. It's weak. It's lame. It's unimpeccable, right? It's crappy. So don't do it. But it's being aware, though. We get caught up in those bubbles of unawareness, and we don't know. That's very important. So now we get to another inappropriate connectivity, which is convenient excuses to avoid stress and pressure, right? Let me just check to see if anybody's joined before I really get into this. So, where you, Norma? Where you, Norma? Norma wanted to come, but she said she was missing the link. So, you know what, Norma? I shall send you the link here. This will be to the whole group, but it's right on top. So, all right, just in case. I don't know. Typically when you say you're going, there we go, Norma. There you go. Typically when you click on a link to either say interested or going for the event. Yes, Norma. All right, good. All right, wonderful, Norma. Yeah. If you don't say I'm there, I don't know you there. See, I can't see it. So wonderful, Norma. Wonderful. All right, very cool. All right. So to carry on in our screen share here. So convenient excuses. This is what we're going to start with today. To avoid excess stress and pressure. And this is anxiety and worry being a convenient, in inverted commas, excuse. As we've seen from the previous slide, where a few of the payoffs and motivations for anxiety and worry are mentioned. A few, so really? Just a few? All right. Me being a little bit amusing to myself there, right? Yeah, just a few, but anyway. Where a few of the payoffs for and the motivations for anxiety are mentioned, we easily see how much of our stress and worry is simply a convenient mechanism to avoid excess anxiety and pressure, right? We believe these are convenient, but as is obvious from the preceding list, not really, not at all. The price is obviously very, very heavy, even though we haven't fully realized it before now. Yeah. So be careful of easy convenience. It's a trick that makes us believe. That's why believe is emphasized. It makes us believe that we're getting value, but it's very shallow. It's very short term. Yes. So this is a constant theme in self-improvement, self-awareness. The difference between short-term and longer term. Yeah. When we go for short-term payoffs, we always pay a significant price. And, I remember this was, I won't say exactly how long ago, but a long time ago. I saw a research study that they did. And the study has been repeated many, many, many times. But this was back in the days when studies were first being videoed and all of this, right? And they weren't always, right? When studies became a big thing and research became a big thing, it kind of exploded at some point, So anyway, like in the 60s and 70s, the stuff really started to take off, maybe even in the 50s already, but still in that era, became a big deal. So they did the study and there were children and they put the children down and they put sweets in front of them, right? And they said, you can have one sweet now, or you can wait, I forget how long it was, like 5 or 10 minutes, and then you'll get 2 or 5 sweets. I don't remember the difference, more sweets, right? And you could see the kids and you watch them now. So they kept the camera on the kids with the sweet in front of them, or wait and not eat the sweet and you'll get more, right? Some kids, they could not control themselves. They had to have it now. They thought the payoff and they just ate it and that was it, right? No more. And then the other kids, of course, you could see them thinking, yeah, but if I wait, I'll get more, right? Now you say, well, what's the point of this study? the point was they followed up on those children, right? They wanted to see how that the difference in the psychology, in the mindset between short-term and longer-term thinking, and getting immediate payoffs, immediate short-term gratification, instant gratification, and being able to wait, having that awareness and sensibility, and of course the sobriety involved, and discipline and all sorts of stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of qualities that are involved in the ability to delay gratification, right? Many positive qualities. So they followed up. And like I said, there have been tons of these studies. Some of those original studies are probably still going, right? But they followed up, 10, 15, 20 years later to see how these children turned out. Right now, what would you think? How do they turn out? What would be your guess? Yeah. Would you think, is it a difference between the two or not? Right? Hey, Ramsey's here too. Marvelous, marvelous. And Bina's here. Hello, everyone. Most awesome. Always good to have you present, Bina. Yes, yes, yes. Hello, Ramsey. Hello, hello, hello. So yeah, let me move the chat here to the side. Then I can see it and make this window the right size. Some screen management here. There we go. There we go. All right. So the longer term effect of this, let me unscreen share while I chat about this. It's a very big deal, this thing. Very, very big deal. So the longer term effect of this is, as you might guess, quite profound, right? So I'm keen to hear there. How would you think this would affect the children growing up in the long term? How do you think they turned out, the difference between the two groups? Yeah. Any guesses there? Oh, wait, because there's a bit of a delay, a bit of a lag. So I'll wait for some comments there. I mean, obviously, by implication from what I'm saying, there is a profound difference, right? There you go, Norma. Yes, you can see me now. Hello, Norma. Give Norma the thumbs up. Yeah. No magic. Very good. So obviously there is a profound difference, yes? And the difference is that those kids who went for immediate gratification, they ended up in having not such good lives, right? They struggled, they had problems. But the ones that could wait, their lives were significantly, I don't like the term better, but they had good lives in the relative sense of the word, right? They didn't have problems, struggles, and get in trouble and all sorts of stuff, right? The terms they used in the studies were successful. Now, again, I don't care for this term either because they're very subjective terms. And, success is usually measured in kind of nonsense metrics like fame and money. That's not a successful life, in my thing. If you're happy and you're satisfied, you're content, you have joy and beauty and love in your lives, now you're successful. Whether you have money or not, that's a side benefit. Yes, it's not dependent. Many people I know that don't have much money, but are happy. They love their lives and wonderful lives. I mean, I just know a couple of them right here. Yeah, they're not wealthy people, but they live fantastically joyful, blissful lives. They have lots of love and goodness and moreness in their lives, especially moreness, right? So, right, Bina? I mean, you'll attest to the incredible moreness you have in your life. This is fantastic, right? So to me, that would be the category, right? Being connected to moreness, to joy, not the typical success metrics, right? Those are a bit shallow. But nonetheless, though, right, this is the lack of problems, though. Those who had that short-term mindset, bubble mindset, immediate gratification, now, and they didn't see beyond the immediate. They couldn't see beyond the immediate. And of course, they had no emotional control, no self-discipline, and all of this, right? And no, there's a logical gap there too. It's like, really, you can have the one sweet now, or can be $1, $5, whatever the reward is. You can't just wait a little bit and get more. Seriously, you cannot wait that little bit. It's like, wow, if you can't wait, if you have to have it now, isn't that just automatically going to make a lot of problems in your life? So not being able to wait. That's why patience is a superpower. I'm getting a little bit off the topic here, But I wanted to make this point about short term versus longer term. It's a massive big deal. Yeah, it's very, very big deal. So when we look at convenient excuses, that's how I got onto this topic. They're convenient because, well, it's convenient in inverted commas. You believe it's convenient, but you are trading off. You're paying a lot for that convenience of having it now, that shallow short-term convenience, right? This is a massive, massive, massive price that we pay for this, and don't do it, right? So don't use your anxiety and worry and stress as a convenient excuse to avoid, your anxiety and worry as a convenient excuse to supposedly avoid stress and pressure. Right? So when you start worrying in this, what are you doing? You're diverting your attention, your awareness away from the thing that's putting pressure on you, that's stressful. Right? So whatever that is, okay, let's say you're in a relationship that's not ideal, right? All right, let's say it's at work. Your relationship boss is not good. You've got a terrible horror of a boss, and now you don't want to deal with the reality that, hey, you know what, really, I got to change my job because this boss is just no good, right? They're not a nice person. They're a horrible person. They're a bully and a BMN and all sorts of stuff. So you don't want to face this. It's an awful truth. You don't want to deal with it. So what do? You start worrying about other stuff. You start worrying about the weather. You're worrying about politics. You're worrying about your friends' relationships and all sorts of stuff. Convenient excuses to avoid stress and pressure, right? Diversion, diversion. It's a massive price we pay. So no good, no good. Be aware though that we can do this. Right. So now we are discerning the complexity is our theme. I always keep those top things in mind there because it provides contextual relevance to what we're doing. And when you know what you're doing and you have contextual relevance, then things are like, okay, I get it. So we're looking at anxiety and worry, and we're going deeper into the complexity of how it comes about, right? So self-sabotaging oddities. Yeah. So well, that is kind of complex. Yes. So let's look at this. Let's look at how anxiety and worry can sometimes be self-sabotage oddities. We believe we are helping ourselves, but as we've seen from that short list at the beginning of the module, really, in actuality, in the big picture, we're doing nothing but making matters worse, compounding our problems and fooling ourselves. We are doing something good and worthwhile. Okay, maybe we aren't exactly fully to blame because this is what we've been taught and we don't really know any better. Thus, we don't have replacement ways of being. Yeah, that's very important. Actual, positive, useful, functional, and effective replacement enables real resolution and peace of being. Yes. And thus, what I mean the replacement is when we solve a problem, we remove the negative, but that doesn't mean that we've acquired a positive. Like when we're in debt, right? If you're in debt and you owe $1 million, and I come and say, yeah, you go, here's your $1 million to pay off your debt. Now what? Yeah, well, okay, I'm not in debt anymore, but do I have positive income? No, you're just out of debt. You have zero. Doesn't mean you've really solved the problem, right? If you don't have a positive income, well, you're going to just get in debt again, right? See? So sometimes solving the problem doesn't solve the problem, actually, frequently, right? If you treat the symptoms and not the cause, same thing happens. So we need this replacement because if you remove a negative, you're left with zero, not a positive. So fixing the problem, literally and specifically, it simply removes the negative, which leaves you with zero. And we struggle to live in zero, in a void, in nothing. We have to have something. And this is why when you deal with psychological and emotional problems, spiritual problems, and you fix the problem, but you leave somebody in that void, they typically go back to the problem because better the devil you know than the one you don't know. At least I know this. It's comfortable. It's familiar, right? Whereas being in a void, man, this is scary. That's nothing. I don't know what to do. We cannot be nothing. It's really not possible for us to be a nothing. So when we undo things that have been familiar, we create that hole. And if we don't fill it with something positive to replace it, we now have problems, right? It's like, thinking of my bread there now. Let's say you've got the old moldy bread, but you're really, really hungry. Well, right, you got to eat old moldy bread. Okay. See, so I fix your problem of the moldy bread, but, well, I'm still hungry. I need something to eat. Well, I go back to eating my moldy bread because, well, you didn't give me something else to eat. Or I didn't give myself something else to eat, right? Don't rely on other people to solve your problems and be the magical answer to everything. You're the only one that can fix yourself, right? So you are. So we have to be very, very careful about this, that we don't sabotage ourselves inadvertently by fixing the problem only and leaving ourselves with a void with no replacement, and then we just go right back there, right? It's a self-sabotage oddity, right? So we need actual, positive, useful, functional, and effective replacement enables real resolution and peace of being, right? So we have to be very careful about our beliefs. Is our belief real, or our beliefs plural? Right? Are they real? Do they actually mean something? Or are they just something that we're believing because it's convenient? Yes. Our beliefs are incredibly self-sabotaging if they are limited bubble beliefs, right? Like we believe we should worry. What a terrible belief, right? We believe that it's making us better. We believe it's helping. We believe it's showing we care. We believe it makes us look righteous or important or whatever, all of those payoffs, right? Those are all beliefs, beliefs, beliefs. When you look at the reality is you're still worrying and anxious. And do you like worry? Is worry a positive thing? No, it's not. Is anxiety a positive thing? No, it's not. So it doesn't matter all those reasons that you say, oh, this is no, you still, at the end of the day, you're still ending up worrying and anxious, and that's not healthy. It's not good. It's not fun, right? So whatever the BS that you're saying, well, they do it for this and that reason, you still BS. You're still ending up in a negative situation, right? So be careful of self-sabotage oddities because of weak beliefs, unsubstantiated beliefs, false beliefs. And belief, most of the time we just believe it's wonderful because I believe it. So belief becomes a very arrogant related thing, right? If you put an old driver in a new car, you will have the same driving experience. Yes, exactly, Ramsey. That's a nice quote there. Exactly. You want a new driving experience? Learn to drive anew. Don't just drive in the same way. Precisely. So replacement. Learn to drive in a more appropriate, more effective, more efficient way. Right? Don't drive with unawareness. Drive with awareness. Yeah. Replacement. Very cool. More on self-sabotaging oddities. Thus, if we ended there, let me just continue because it's carrying on, right? So actual, positive, useful, functional, and effective replacement enables real resolution and peace of being. Thus, really, we self-sabotage ourselves with what we believe to be payoffs and rewards for anxiety and worry, but they really aren't. Not only aren't those payoffs worthwhile, they are actually detrimental and harmful, not to mention energy draining and not fun. Thus, when it comes to anxiety and worry, we are our own worst enemies. Yes. So expand that thinking, think longer term. Don't just be in the bubble of now and eat that one sweet and miss out on the more sweets down the road. Yes, this is very important. Expand the bubble. See the whole picture. Don't just see the immediate of the now. Those kids who had to eat the one sweet now, they were in an awareness bubble, right? And also some of them may have had trust issues too. So, well, I'll rather take my sweet for sure now than gamble on getting more later. Yeah? So be careful of inappropriate distrust. There's inappropriate trust for sure, but there's also inappropriate distrust. Yes? I mean, yeah, unfortunately, sadly, some kids have learned that you can't trust any adults. Fair enough. Those kids, go away, eat your sweet right now. Yes? But also they're not aware of the contextual environment of the test. Now, well, maybe they were testing for self-trust, right? So there's a gamble involved, and we have to understand this and be aware of that, right? So you have to look at the greater context to be able to make that assessment. Without being aware of the greater context, how on earth do you make sensible choices when it comes to trust? Because trust is a risk assessment. That's what trust is, right? If I'm trusting, I'm willing to take a chance, or I have to trust because I have to take a chance, right? But still, it's about risk. Trust and risk, same thing, right? So we have to really be aware and see the bigger context. Otherwise, I can't really gauge whether I need to trust or if my trust is appropriate and sensible, right? So I have to see the bigger context, like those kids, right? They have to know whether the situation is one which merits trust, which warrants trust, right? Very important. All right, there's a quote here. Just what, just what exactly does worry actually achieve? Just what exactly does worry actually achieve? Like seriously, just what exactly? I really want to know. What does it help? Why do it? What's the point? How does it make sense? How is it justifiable? Really, is there any good reason to worry? Aspirant Nora. As you can see, Nora is very direct, very sober, very sensible. Yeah, doesn't mess about, no BS for Nora. Right? So aspirant Nora from the disappearance of Nora. Yeah, a little side book from one of the aspirants from the New Nobility, from the BLS series. But anyway, really good quote. Yeah, it's a good. She asked a good question. Really, is there any good reason to worry? Yeah, the situation or ourself refers trust. Yeah, exactly. We have to pay attention. Is our trust or not trusting an internal issue or an external one? And for that, we need to have the ability to be patient, to discern the bigger context, to check out and figure it out and think about it, think it through to the end, and not assume and not believe. Very important. Yes, with trust, it's a very big deal. Very big deal. Assumptions, expectations, beliefs, these are all very big deals, and they really affect our lives in profound ways. Yeah? So we have to be very careful with them. They are very big deals. All right, we get to our next one here, which is blame and non-ownership. Now, these are, we're looking at the underlying mechanisms of anxiety and worry. What goes on under the hood, deep inside the computer, right? We're looking really deep inside to see why is it that we do this, right? What are the reasons and the logics? And we were looking to understand it, because through understanding, as I started, when we truly understand, then change just happens, right? Because, well, if you understand why it makes sense, how do you not act on that? It's not possible, right? And if you understand that it's negative, truly understand, well, how do you keep doing it? It's not possible, right? At least not if you have any kind of integrity and sensibility. Right? How much of anxiety and worry is the shifting of blame onto others or situations for what are really our own issues and problems? We see ourselves in others all too often. We don't want to own the failings we see. We worry about them, they make us anxious. Expressing these fears through anxiety and worry makes us feel like we are doing something about our lack of learning. But is this real? Does it work? Does anxiety and worry actually help? Or does it just make you believe that it helps? See how important beliefs are, yeah? We have to be super careful with beliefs. If we believe it helps and it doesn't actually help, isn't that a really terrible trap to fall into? Yeah, a terrible trap. Very powerful trap. This belief trap. And I have another program on. It's just called Feeling and Believing, and it's about the feeling and believing loop. And I'll share that on well, whenever appropriate, right? Maybe next week, because it's so powerful. We'll go through that, but it's kind of long. Well, it's not a long program, but it's a lot to it. So maybe I'll wait till we're done with the whole program. But to understand that there is a connection between feelings and believing, and that the one can reinforce the other. Like, for instance, you go into the child's bedroom, right? The child is feeling anxious and afraid because it's dark in the bedroom. They're alone. They've never been alone before. You know, they're young children, and I need to learn to sleep on their own. So it's unfamiliar, unknown, etc. So they're feeling afraid, but they don't really know why. Right? They need a reason to feel afraid, because they've learned that when you feel stuff, you have to have a reason. Well, not necessarily, but still, it's part of what we grow up with, right? So now the child says, well, and the parent maybe comes in and says, well, why are you afraid? There's nothing to be afraid of. Well, the child doesn't want to look stupid. So they create a reason. Well, I'm afraid because there's a monster under the bed. The child's not necessarily lying. They are feeling the fear. The fear is very real. So they need something to legitimize that fear. And the parent asked, well, I don't know, there must be a monster under the bed. They don't say must be, they just say there is, because internally this stuff happens very fast, right? So now they've created a belief to support the feeling, to justify the feeling. But now what happens in the very next instance, this stuff all happens very, very quickly, right? In the very next instance, they say, well, of course it's a monster. How do I know this is a monster? Well, because I'm afraid and the feeling is real. And so there must be a monster because I'm really feeling afraid. So the belief was created to justify the feeling. But then in the very next instance, that feeling justifies and supports the belief. And now you end up in this infinity loop, and I call it the lunacy loop, right? Now you get this artificial belief reinforcing the feeling, and the feeling reinforces the belief, and round it goes, right? See, an infinity loop, yeah? Infinity loop. So we have to be very, very, very aware of the relationships between feelings and beliefs. Very, very powerful, right? Worry and anxiety are partly a direct result of not seeking adequate means to solve the problems. Yes, exactly, Ramsey. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Good takeaway of what we're saying, or repeat back more accurately. Good repeat back of what I've been saying. If you keep yourself busy with teaching yourself new ways to solve your problems, worry and anxiety will decrease and you will feel less stuck. Yes. Google, Facebook, and YouTube are free. You can search and learn from other experiences. Exactly. And, you can do this course, which is free too. There's lots of resources if you aren't able to find them. Yes, free resources usually come with a price, unfortunately, but sometimes you get stuff like this. This is a whole course I'm just giving away for free, right? There's no strings attached, right? Sometimes you get people doing stuff just because, right? Just because. So there are lots of good resources out there if you are challenged, right? Financially challenged. So this whole point here about blame is when we see others and we see their stuff, we see our stuff in them. That's typically what happens. But we can shift it into anxiety and worry, and well, now I don't have to face the awful truth, right? So I can avoid the blame and non-ownership. I don't want to own my problems, so I worry about the problems of others. Yeah, see the payoff? Yeah? The complexity. So it boils down to being self-honest, right? Yes, we all prize honesty, but how often, were you, when you were a child, you were told, be honest, be honest, be honest. How often were you told to be self-honest? I never heard this. All my years of childhood, I never ever heard any adult ever say, be self-honest. Never. Always just be honest. There's a big difference because, of course, they know. They were, yes, most of the adults that I knew, they were all honest people. I'd trust them with anything. But self-honest, hell no. Nope, sorry, they weren't self-honest. They're very honest people, but self-honest, no. Right? They didn't want to face the awful truths inside them. They didn't want to deal with their issues. Didn't want to deal with their stuff. Didn't want to change. Didn't want to look. What change implies I needed to change. Well, now, that means I wasn't so good before. Oh, that doesn't look very good. So you see, all these buts. So now we get to one of the biggest problems of anxiety and worry, and why people have anxiety and worry. Because of not knowing what else to do, right? So they worry because they don't know what else to do. I saw this in my mother. Didn't know what else to do. Didn't have much imagination. Didn't make an effort to try and figure out what else to do because, man, that brought up all sorts of things that she didn't want to deal with and issues, right? So I'll just worry instead. But, but, what else is there to do? Lots of buts, yeah. This is a serious issue and problem. We default to behaviors which don't really work and are even self-harming simply because we don't know what else to do. I cannot emphasize this paragraph enough, right? We default to behaviors which don't really work and are even self-harming simply because we don't know what else to do. Yeah. You can look around you, look at peer pressure, social conformity, and how many things people do that ridiculously harmful to themselves, horrible stuff, the bunnies in a real life, college life, and actually go and interview some of those college students who are involved with it, and try and get them to be in a really honest mood. Did you like really actually enjoy this, or were you just doing it because you wanted to conform, pressure, right? And they say, well, yeah, I know, but I had to go along with it. I didn't want to be out and all this. I had to fit in and all this stuff, right? There are all these reasons. But you say, did you have a way of not doing this? Did you have some alternative to doing this? No, I didn't know what else I could do. I just kind of had to go along. Didn't really have a choice, right? How often do you hear people say that? Well, I just kind of went along with it because I didn't really have a choice. I didn't really have a choice. Of course, they don't mean that literally you always have a choice, but what they really mean when they say I didn't really have a choice, they really meaning I didn't know what else to do. Now, in the moment, it might be difficult to come up with things to do, but that doesn't mean you can't be preemptive. Start else can do before the so pay in this many we can do that are different. And once you get into the habit of replacements, create placements. It's a matter of training your brain. It's just a new way of thinking, a new habit that you got into, a new mental habit, not the habit of unawareness, but as a deliberate habit, as a skill and an ability. We can figure out what else to do. Right? Just takes some effort, a little bit initially to do. Right? We can do it. We just have to know that we can. So to continue here, this is amazing when we think about it. We just act out of sheer habit, habits which makes us unthinking and to some extent mindless. Don't be mindless, people. Don't be mindless. When looking at it with some perspective, as we are now, it seems so simple and ludicrous, but it's a reality. Also, important to understand that significant shifts of being can and do come about through simple moments of awareness such as these. So understanding is a very profound thing. We have that understanding which leads to a shift of being, and we can have profound change because of it. But it means we have to be open and willing to these alternatives, because not knowing what to do is part of the problem. The second step is being willing to do something else. So many are so afraid of the unknown. They have so little self-trust. They're so insecure that they are unwilling to do something different simply because it is different. Different to them represents risk. Come on, people. If you're never going to be willing to take a little bit of a chance and do something different, you're always going to be stuck exactly where you're at. If you're happy exactly where you're at, fine. But just be aware that if your happiness is dependent on where you at and where you at staying the same, you are vulnerable to life coming along and changing shit around you, right? And this happens. Life's going, stuff changes, and the next thing you know, it's like, and now because that cozy bubble that in has been popped and things have changed. Now, because you've trained your whole life not to be able to just be able to handle change and difference, now it's a mess for you and it's a calamity. And we see this all the time, right? People have been living in these cozy bubbles, things change, and suddenly they can't handle it and they fall apart. So this ability, the skill, right, to say, I want to figure out what else I can do, that comes from perspective shifting, thinking through to the end, profound skills, right? Part of impeccability, big deal. So when we make this effort to do this, we say, oh, I'm preparing myself to be able to deal with change. And life and change is synonymous. I don't care how much you are trying to make your bubble cozy. Life says, nope, sorry, we're not going to let you do this because this is not a good thing to do. You're making yourself vulnerable. Yes. So even if you don't need it, practice doing so. It's a good survival skill, not just in a physical survival skill, but emotional, mental, spiritual, psychological survival. We need to develop the ability to handle difference, handle change, and to figure out what else we can do. Options, right? Don't just restrict yourself to what others say you can do, or just the thing that you already do. No, what you already know is never enough. What you already know is never enough. I repeat, very profound point. Yes, what you already know is never enough. Now, we like to think it is, but no. Very powerful. Valid fears. Oh, we're coming into the complexity now of the payoffs and the complexity of anxiety and worry. You say, but, more buts, but you say, my anxiety and worry are based on real fears. Yes, this is so. Life comes with real fears. This is true. Your fears may be valid, are valid, but, but again, are anxiety and worry the only valid response and behavior to deal with valid fears? We read that again before I answer it. Your fears may be valid, are valid, but, but again, are anxiety and worry the only valid response and behavior to deal with valid fears? No, they aren't. No, they are not. Further, are anxiety and worry an effective, valid response? No, they are not. Let's go back to our lime tamer example. The lime tamer walks into the cage with the lions. Is the risk that he's taking valid? Yes. Is him being fearful in that instance valid? No. So we have to understand complexity. Don't equate fear with risk. Not the same thing. Fear is a negative experience or evaluation or emotional response to risk that is too high, right? Which is danger, right? That's what danger is. That's when the risk is very high. Yes? When something is dangerous, it's got a high degree of risk involved. Yes. So the fear, though, is that negative response to high risk. When that lion tamer goes into that cage, he cannot exhibit fear because fear will turn him into prey. Yes, that's how the lion determines prey. When you run and you're fearful, that makes you prey. Yes, so he cannot feel fear even though the risk is real. So his fear is not valid, even though the risk is valid. Yes, I mean, when somebody says, "Well, are you taking a risk?" Yes, that's very valid. He's really is taking a risk, but he's able to manage that risk because he doesn't feel fear. Same thing with other people who are in high risk professions, right? Firemen, whatever, policemen, right? They have to learn how to manage their fear so they don't equate fear with risk. Now, you've got a soldier or a policeman or a fireman who is inappropriate, who's fearless. And I said, man, I don't want to work with this guy because he's going to get me into trouble. He's going to go into situations that are the risk is too high. He's going to run into a building where it's literally about to collapse. And well, if he's taking me with him and I'm with him and I've got to go and rescue him, pull him out, he's causing me problem or get me into trouble by going somewhere and I've got to follow. And so people who are fearless, they cause lots of problems, right? Because they don't evaluate risk. So we have to understand the difference between fear and risk assessment. Yes. We want to learn to assess risks and act cautiously, sensibly, deliberately, appropriately, without fear. Fear is an emotional connotation to risk assessment. Yeah. So just because the risk is real doesn't and valid doesn't make the fear valid, right? So we have to understand this difference and to say, yes, I've got valid risks in my life, which now are being equated with fears, right? And you think, well, because I've got valid fears, this entitles me and it's appropriate to anxiety and worry. No, it's not. Why? Because is your anxiety and worry effective as a response to risk management or fear management, right? So when we understand fear and risk and their relationship, and then we understand furthermore that we are dealing with anxiety and worry in order to manage risk through inappropriately managing fear. You don't have to be afraid of risk. You don't have to be afraid of risk. The lion tamer is not afraid of that risk. He's cautious of it. He's sensible of it. He's aware of it. He's managing it, right? He's very acutely understanding what is involved, but he's not letting fear drive him, right? So fear is an inappropriate response to risk. Yes. Now, don't say, oh, yeah, but what about adrenaline? That's different. Yes. That is a response that says, hey, I need to be energized because this is a very high risk. So adrenaline is a risk response, not necessarily a fear response, because fear can cause other sorts of things. Yes, fear might result in an adrenaline spike. It might also result in panic, and you literally run around in circles, or you freeze in the spot and you get eaten up. Yeah. So fear is not a good idea. So Norma, you're saying we resize it? Question mark. Yes, kind of. It's rather than resizing it, we are relabeling it or re-examining it. We're looking at it from different perspectives, different awarenesses, right? So we are reassessing it and we are reassociating it. So here's the problem, and get back to where I started with, right? Meaningful associations. We have to be very, very mindful of this. Our brain is set up to work by associations. So we have risk. High risk gets associated with fear. Fear then gets associated with anxiety and worry. And the loop closes, and we get anxiety and worry being associated with risk and risk management, risk assessment, etc. But just because something has got a high potential doesn't mean it's an actual risk. So our fear needs to be based on the actuality. Now, when we look at anxiety and worry, like with my mother, that weekly phone call, they're worrying about all these things. They never followed up to see if it actually turned out to be so. They were fearful about stuff turning out negative, but only in their imaginations was it so. Those things never actually materialized to be a negative. I followed up and checked to see if this there was. I did a study on it, right? So anyway, I was a bit of a social scientist as a teenager. Yeah. All right. Yes. Yes. Okay. Nerd. Weird, but doesn't matter. Yeah, I was a nerd without being a nerd, by the way. Anyway, so the point is, I checked and saw no, none of those things ever came true. They were totally bogus. They simply took their potential and focused on that side of it only. They didn't do a true risk assessment. A true risk assessment would have said, well, it's 50-50. It can go negative, it can go positive. But, really, if I look back at the history of these things, they almost always turn out okay. Sometimes, maybe not. But, the risk is actually, when you look at it in the totality and based on experience, the risk is actually very low. You're just focusing on the potential and you're isolating this and you're making this your world. You're forgetting the bigger picture. Why do they do that? Because of the payoffs. It was convenient for them to treat these things as high risk because that validated the anxiety and worry, which now validates them not actually getting off their backsides and doing stuff, right? They could just sit there jabbing and blabbing and look how caring I am, look how wonderful I am. Well, you don't want to make an effort to really be caring and really to do an effort and all of this stuff, right? So they got all these shallow short-term payoffs for what really is crappy behavior. Yeah. So it is kind of a resizing, Norma, but it's more reshaping, and particularly it's reassociating. When we reassociate risk and understand true risk, then sometimes, hey, if you have to take a risk, sometimes it's like, okay, let's say you have to cross over narrow roads and you have to go, it's a narrow little edge, something, and if you're too fearful, it makes your muscles not work right. They're trembling and shaking. Well, now you can't be stable and walk across the thing. Well, there you go. You fall off. See? So we have to be very careful. And we think fear is an appropriate risk response. It's not. It's absolutely not. When you look how much trouble people get into because of fear, and from a survival point of view, watch National Geographic, watch the animal things and see how they deal with stuff sometimes. Yes, fear gets them to run away, but other times not. They panic, they succumb, they overexert. Their fear gets them so much adrenaline. Yes, they get away in the short term, but the sensible prey hunters will just follow along. And when that adrenaline rush gives you that collapse, adrenaline collapse, right? You've spent so much excess of energy, you collapse now, and then they just follow along, and then they catch you, right? So we have to be very careful. Fear is very dangerous. Fear is prey response, not predator response. Yes, doesn't mean that the predators have and don't have fears. They do too, but they go, they're willing to take on risk when they attack. So this is when we understand this relationship between fear and I don't want to be a prey to things, right? Sorry. I don't want to be a predator either. I don't want to be none of those. They both have their limitations. I want to be sensible and appropriate and have the ability to transcend those limitations. And through this, through understanding the relationship between risk and fear and the inappropriate relationship between risk and fear, and saying there's other ways I can deal with risk. I can be sober, I can be sensible, I can be inventive, I can be creative. There's many ways that I can deal with risk, right? To minimize my risk. And this is not knowing what to do. If I don't know what to do, well, then I'm kind of screwed, right? So to train the brain to think of other things to do, other environments, to learn to be creative, to be inventive, to have problem solving, to not just believe, to look at the bigger context, bigger problem, to be in attunement with the universe, to say, hey, I get some inspiration from the world around me, etc. And there's a lots of replacements that you can do. This is a big topic. This is what Way-of-Impeccability is all about. It's all about replacement tools. But to start with, we can just say, hey, I don't necessarily know, but at least I know there's a possibility and I can do other things. I don't have to default to fear, which is anxiety and worry. Anxiety and worry is just a way of managing fear because we don't know how to deal with things, don't know how to deal with risk. And also, we don't know how to deal with our imaginations. Like my mother, it was all and a friend. This was all imagined risk, not actual risk. Yeah, and mostly anxiety and worry is about imagined risk. It's risk that you are focusing on to the exclusion of the non-risk. It's a disproportionate, inappropriate risk evaluation. So be accurate in your risk evaluations. When we actually accurately assess the risk actually involved in things we worry about, they turn out to be very small, right? I mean, truly, do this. Do an actual legitimate risk assessment of the things that you're worried about. How valid are those fears actually? How much actual risk is there? Right? Well, fear is never really valid, but how valid is the risk? When you start to separate risk and fear, changes everything, right? So stop thinking of your fears because your fears create that feeling belief loop, right? They create the validity to support the fears because otherwise you're being foolish. So you have to believe there's some reason to have the fear, right? So be careful of creating things to justify your fears. Shift fear to risk assessment. So is this truly a big risk? If it is, I'm going to do something. If not, then okay, I'm cool. Yeah. And if there's nothing I can do and there is a risk, well, too bad. That's it. Can't be helped. That's life, right? We have to be a bit fatalistic sometimes. All right. So the tasks and exercises here. Write out in detail what actual real value and usefulness you get from anxiety and worry. Now, very few people are actually going to do this, sadly. It's about why. Even people sometimes who pay to do this don't want to do these exercises. That's why it's good if they do pay, because, well, then to get the value, you kind of got to do the stuff because otherwise you're wasting your money. But it's amazing, right? It's a very simple exercise, but very few will actually do it. So anybody watching this, you really want to deal with your anxiety and worry, do this exercise, this simple exercise. Write out in detail what actual real value and usefulness you get from anxiety and worry. It's going to be a very short list, if it's going to be anything at all, right? You're going to write a lot of stuff there, but then the more you write it, you're going to realize, you know what? Actually, this is a bunch of BS. Actually, this is not actual real value. I kind of thought it was. So you're going to write up a whole lot of stuff that is going to make you look foolish. But if you're honest and you say, you know what, here's the list. And in the end, I wrote it out, but then I had to cross a line through it, right? And if you bring that list to the table, this is going to be profound because the self-honesty involved. They say, wow, in doing this exercise, I realized I believed that I had real good reason. When I started, I thought, oh, sure, you know what? So this is a challenge. Of course, I can find you a bunch of reasons. But then as you did it, you realized it didn't actually pan out, right? And you see that difference between what goes on inside the head, shadow thoughts, beliefs, and the actual reality, right? There's no actual real value and usefulness that we get from anxiety and worry. Yeah. At least I never like absolutes. I'm assuming maybe somebody will find something. I say, okay, all right, fair enough. In this case, it's valid. In this case, in that particular context, all right. But I can't imagine it. But I don't want to say it's not possible because many things that I didn't imagine to be possible also, right? So could be some exception to the rule. There typically is. Our next task and exercise here is Why do you think you are anxious and worry? And what may be the deeper reasons? People just do without examining why. Go into it. Look a little deeper. Why do you think you're anxious and worried? Give me some good answers, plural, to that. And what may be the deeper reasons? A deeper reason could be the things that we said before. Well, I just learned it. I picked it up from my mother and my father. They were worries, right? Whatever. Okay, I'm afraid. I don't know. I feel incompetent. I don't trust myself, so on and so forth, right? Deeper reasons. Yeah. Deeper reasons. Understand, discern the complexity. And if you're not sure what discern the complexity means, go and look up those terms. Asking chat there, right? Don't take it for granted that you should know what discerning the complexity means. It's not a simple title. There's a lot of complexity to this, and it needs some discernment to discern the complexity of that simple title, right? So I'm not saying this in any way other than don't assume that that you understand. And if you don't understand and you're not quite sure, check, follow up. Uh, you know, we are not, if you think you always know, then you're just going to be arrogant. So if you don't know, you don't know. That's it. It's not a big deal. So what? Is there anybody who knows everything that you know of? No. So we all know lots of things we don't know, right? Even the most knowledgeable person will tell you, what I know is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what there is to know. And yes, a really peculiar conundrum or just an oddity, really. The more you know, the more you become aware of how much you don't know. So at the same time as our knowing grows, so does our not knowing. Yeah. The more I know, the more I become aware of how much I don't know. So they both grow together. I call it this inverted pyramid of knowledge. It's kind of like an inverted pyramid in our head, right? On top of our head, right? It's like this pyramid or funnel of knowledge. So the more you fill that up, of course, the space gets bigger. The space above what you fill up is the space of not knowing, right? But the more you fill it, you keep pushing that up and you will become aware of that bigger space, right? Keeps on going, right? So uh, what were you typing, Ramsey? Oh, about the more you know, the more you know that you don't know. Yeah, it's very profound when you think of that inverted pyramid, right? Because, like I said, as you fill it up with knowing, that knowing makes you realize. Oh, you start looking around. You go to the next level. Oh, this is much bigger than before. Oh my goodness, it's like living in a high-rise building, and each floor it's like this pyramid, right? You go to the next floor, it's always bigger. It's always bigger. So as your awareness gets to the next level, you realize, wow, the not knowing is bigger. Yeah, it's very profound to be aware of this. So anybody who is kind of a little bit hung up here, but I don't know, and they feel foolish. Well, it's foolish to feel foolish about not knowing. It's foolish to feel foolish about not knowing. So if you don't want to be a fool, then make peace with not knowing. It's just a reality. It's like, sort of, being upset that the sky is blue. Well, it's a reality. Like, what's the point of being upset? Yeah, but I don't like blue. Blue, it is what it is. It's foolish to be stressed by it. It's not going to make any difference to it, right? So ignorance is part of life, right? There are ways of dealing with ignorance. Yes. And that's abstract contextual thinking, but that's a different topic. Anyway, so the more you know how to deal with your ignorance. Yeah, that's a very different story. That's a very different story, right? Doesn't just because I become more ignorant as the more I know, in a sense, yes, but I'm also better able to deal with not knowing. Yeah. So when you learn certain skills, like, okay, when I go up to a building site and I've bought a plot of land and I want to build a house. I know nothing about house building. I don't know how you use tools. Now this is a big problem. But if I know how to use tools, I say, well, fine. It doesn't matter what plot of land I get on. I'll build a house because I know how to use tools. Not a problem. I know how to deal with my ignorance. I have tools. See, I don't know every house. I don't know the plan and all this. I don't know that specific house. I don't need to. I can create the house. I can do it because I have the tools. I have the skills to figure it out, right? See? So when we have tools, we can manage ignorance. That's what it's all about. Yeah, managing our ignorance. How did you come to be anxious and worry? How much of it was taught or learned from your environment? And how much of a slave do you want to be to to your environment, to the things that you just pick up from others? Yeah? Do you want to be an inadvertent slave or not? No. Decide for yourself. Just because others did it doesn't mean it's sensible, right? Just because others did it doesn't make it sensible. Just because everybody did it doesn't make it sensible either, right? The mob, the mass is generally wrong. So if everybody's doing it, the odds are that it's a load of crap and nonsense and bullshit. So if you're ever saying and using this excuse, well, yeah, but everybody was doing it, that typically is going to get into trouble. Yeah? If you were ever in fairly strict school environments, when I was at school, if you said, oh, but everybody's doing it, that's guaranteed hiding right there. Yeah. That was not a good excuse. That was guaranteed hiding. Yeah, but everybody else is stupid and you're now just copying their stupidity. Well, that's doubly stupid. Now, there you go. Guaranteed hiding just for using that excuse. So, not good, right? What is more valid? What is a more valid and effective response to valid fears than anxiety and worry? And when I say fears here, I mean risk. Yes, I made that close understanding when we take fear to be risk assessment. It changes the emotional quality of fear. It changes it entirely. But I used fear here because, this is sort of, the course is designed for, it's a starting course and we're getting going. So, I want to keep it more in the language that we typically use. I want to get away from that too much, right? But already know this. When you're going through yourself, just understand fear is risk. Same thing, right? And don't confuse the two. And don't see that when a fear is valid, in other words, when there's real risk, don't assume that the negative emotional response that goes along with it is valid either. It's not, right? Like we see from the lion tamer and the fireman and stuff like this, right? They learn to manage the risk and they learn to therefore not to be unduly affected by fear, but to be appropriately affected by it. So we've got to, same way as we manage risk, we've got to manage fear. So end module 3. What's different in you now? Yeah, what's different in you now? Good question to end with there. These ending questions, they sort of like little kind of mind teasers. Yeah. So, see, I like balance. That now was on that line there, and it was throwing it a bit out. So, but if I put this off center, and the module 3 was still in the center here, then the whole slide isn't balanced. You see. So in order to balance it, anyway, just a little bit of fun of just the way I like to do things. So balance is very important in life. See, it's still a little high. Yeah, there we go. Balance, very key to be in balance. And that's what anxiety and worry, they are imbalances. They are imbalances. Yes, fear is an imbalance. Yeah, risk is part of life. We need to learn how to balance risk. And the way to balance risk, manage risk, is to develop tools. Find replacement ways of being. Learn how to use tools. Develop your abilities. Yes, that's how you balance risk, is by having tools, by having abilities, skills, awareness, sensibility, sobriety, discernment. Yes, tools like honesty, self-honesty, patience, discipline, forbearance. I can go on, right? That's what the dictionary of power is. It is a list of these tools. Yes, inner tools, inner self. It's not what you know, it's what you are. We repeat that. It's not what you know, it's what you are. Yeah, we confuse awareness with knowledge. Not the same thing. Yes. A lot of people have lots of knowledge, they have lots of data. Right? You could have a hard drive, a massive, great big hard drive filled with data. Does this make you sensible and wise? No, it doesn't. Look at Google. You got all the data and information at your fingertips. But if you can't use it, if you don't have the wisdom to discern it, you can't discern the complexity, right? You don't have the ability to utilize that. It's useless. Yeah? So any computer with a lot of data on its hard drive doesn't make it a good computer. No, it's the processing power and the RAM, which RAM is awareness. Yeah, that's what makes a good computer, and not the data. Yes. So be aware. Be aware. It's about awareness, tools in yourself. All right. Before I sign off here, any questions? Any comments? Before I go, please leave them in chat there, right? Ramsey, Norma, Bina, anybody else who was here? George, Any comments? I'm keen to hear from you, George. I hope you're still here. I hope you were listening. Right? You make lots of posts, George, and I'm keen to hear from you. To hear from you. Always good. So please share. Please share. All right. So all good. Before I go, anything? I mean, if I don't respond, very interesting. Oh, my pleasure, Norma. Truly, and I'm always happy you're here, Norma, and Ramsey, everybody who comes. It's a big deal. So I appreciate you coming very much. It's a big deal. So I'm glad it was interesting, Norma. I'm really glad it was interesting. That's our pleasure, Ramsey. Pleasure. You know, I do. You know, I don't care to preach or to teach, neither. But I do enjoy sharing. And you know, if something is important to me, I share it, and hopefully somebody else finds it interesting, maybe valuable, maybe important to them too. But it's all about sharing. Right? That's it. It's all about sharing. So this is cool. This is cool. You know. So and when we share, and then you say, "Oh, this was interesting to you," and then whenever you share back, you get that collaboration going on. Oh, wow! I didn't think of it that way. Oh, and then we put 1 + 1 equals more. That's what collaboration is. That's what sharing is. When you share and counter share and share back and forth, this is you end up with that collaboration, which is 1 + 1 equals more, not two, but more. We end up with more than what we would have been able to acquire on our own. Sharing is incredibly magical, magical stuff. Wondrous, wondrous, and brilliant. All right, I'll see you guys next week. All right, bye bye, bye bye. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Much enjoyed, much appreciated. All right, so end live stream. Here we go. Bye bye, everybody. Bye bye.